So basically, in this talk, I'm going to expose some of Satan's secrets of how he changes the world to suit him, so he can bring people into hell. You know, secretly. He's a trickster, you see. So I'm going to expose some of his tricks for you. You know, because a lot of the things that he said down in hell, that Mary Baxter said that he was saying, actually makes sense to me as to why the world is the way it is. So let's have a look at this. So how Satan makes the world an unhappy place. That's what we're going to look into. So he needs people to rebel against God. He needs people to be fleshy. You know, when we look at Leviticus 19, we actually learn that prostitution is one of the techniques, right, or one of the most dangerous things that brings wickedness in the world. Because you learn that making your daughter a whore will create whoredom in the land, which means that one prostitute turns into lots of prostitutes, and it spreads like a disease, doesn't it? And of course, we've got the most famous prostitute, Jezebel, removed God from Israel. So that's one of the techniques that Satan needs. Satan needs people to stay away from worshipping God. It's as simple as that. And then of course she put in Satan in God's place, which in the form of Baal or Baal-zebub, Beelzebub, right? Which is Satan. Then of course fornication led into Israel messing it up, because remember, Satan down in hell said that he knows the secrets of men because he was in heaven at one point. And that's why he uses women to corrupt men sexually, to make men go into sexual immorality, not keeping themselves pure for marriage, but to delve into sexual immorality. And this is why we have temple prostitutes to Baal. That's what Satan needs. He needs prostitutes. He needs women to be prostitutes so he can get men and women into hell, and witches as well, because Satan has witches in hell just now with him, in cells that Mary Baxter talks about. And of course, in Israel, child sacrifice took place, and then they were cutting themselves, and they did this because they were scared of Baal, which is Satan. They feared Baal because Baal could cause earthquakes. And then of course, in Mary Baxter's book, A Divine Revelation of Satan's Deceptions, Satan killed thousands of people, he said, laughing on his throne, with earthquakes. Used earthquakes to do this. Now let's jump a bit forward in time now, to around about the 1700s, right? Almost like a form of, a bit in it, I don't know if that's the Queen Victorian era, I'm not really sure, but people were more moral back then, and it's because the church was ruling the schools back then. The church was influencing the world, you know, thanks to, like, say, Constantine, who brought the disciplinary of the worship of Yahweh to the world. But Adam Weishaupt of the Illuminati, he rebelled against the church, and he wanted to create a secret society called the Illuminati. The word Illuminati comes from the word Lucifer, bearers of the light. In his lodge he had the god Zeus, and Zeus was traced back to being Baal. Zeus is Satan, basically. The Greeks identified Baal with the Greek god Zeus. I find that interesting. Or Jupiter as well, because Jupiter is the same as Zeus anyway, it's just the Roman form. Then he created a form of New Age movement, Adam Weishaupt did, of the Illuminati, to do with enlightenment, which was to do with studying the ancients and almost creating a new philosophy and a new understanding and being free from religion, basically. Especially the church, because he was against the church, and a lot of Illuminati members were in hatred against the church. He wanted to get rid of the church from the world. He planned to rid marriages, okay, because remember, in marriage, the church is needed, you see, for marriage. But he wanted to get rid of the traditional family unit. Now, don't you find it interesting that in hell, in Mary Baxter's book, A Divine Revelation of Hell, Satan says to his demons to break up families, create lots of evil in the world. Right? Also, Adam Weishaupt, he wanted to abolish all religions, especially the church, from the world. He's pretty successful with it, and he wanted to get rid of healthy morals from the world. Sound familiar, doesn't it? Get rid of the church, get rid of marriages, let less people get married nowadays. Yeah? We're going back to Baal worship, it's like. The Illuminati and Freemasons, of course, helped to get rid of the church from the schools. Because schools, remember, would be influencing the children's minds to have a moral code. But when you remove the church, immorality sets in, anarchy sets in, doesn't it? Because they don't fear the idea that there could be a hell. They don't fear the idea that there could be a God judging them. Now we have the United Nations, right, which people have connected to the Illuminati. At the top they have Lucifer's Trust by Alice Bailey of the United Nations, the publishing company of the United Nations, to do with Lucifer, Satan, basically. And she produced books for the New Age movement of studying the ancients, just like the Illuminati did. And interestingly, the UN wanted to rid religious dogma from the minds of men. That was their plans for their having the one world government, which of course is the Illuminati plans to have a one world government as well, back in the 1700s. And now we've got the United Nations wanting to rid religious dogma. Oh, I've got good timing. Now, right, so I'll leave links for people to check out my facts, okay? The Illuminati, other techniques was to help remove religion, was to create and to be the forerunners of communism and a bit of nihilism, right? A form of, type of atheism in the minds of the public, to help remove religious dogma from the minds of the public. So they become more atheistic and more materialistic-like in their thinking, and have no care for spiritual things. In Mary Baxter's book, Satan, of course, we learned, was to use sexual immorality, using women as puppets, to turn women practically into prostitutes to help corrupt men. That's what Satan is pretty much doing. That's what he's doing. This would be why Satan, of course, has the temple of prostitutes, which I just mentioned previously. Nowadays, the prostitution of women is for undisciplined men that just don't seem to know how to say no. So how does Satan do this then? Well, he has to train women at a very young age, doesn't he? Yeah, the schools and the media and the toys, because obviously kids play with toys, so you need to start off with the toys first, don't you? In the Queen Victorian era, which was a bit more moral, if you look at the dolls, the way the dolls would dress, they dressed pretty, don't they? They dress morally. They've got very big dresses, they cover up more. But if you look at the young Barbie dolls nowadays, they're dressed with hardly anything on. They're dressed more erotic-like. Yeah, like they're showing off their bodies. So young girls are learning how to dress like the Barbie dolls, right? When you look at any of these kind of dolls, they're always dressed with hardly anything on, skin-tight clothing. Okay? So this is one of Satan's tricks, okay? Then, of course, the media teaches teenagers to live a promiscuous lifestyle, just going on dates and then sleeping around, and the media presents this as something cool. That's another one of Satan's tricks. The other trick is, in the schools, they do not teach the girls marriage. They teach them how to fornicate, don't they? Yeah? They remove moral code from the schools. So now women have basically learned from toys and from the media and the schools on how to live the life of a prostitute, the way a prostitute's lifestyle is. Just a quick note, just so you understand that the difference between a woman in this day and age, the difference between a woman and a prostitute nowadays is that a prostitute sleeps with more men than a normal woman does, and a prostitute is getting paid for it, whereas a woman is not. And I'll go through some pointers here to prove that this is what's going on. Number one, they dress like prostitutes. No, they don't really modestly dress. It's very rare to see a woman that dresses moderately. Number two, they can flirt and seduce, just like the way prostitutes do, to maybe get boyfriends. If they're trying to get a boyfriend, they'll do things with their hair, or makeup. They will be like a Jezebel trying to manipulate the guy to take an interest in them, just like a prostitute does. Number 3, they can have sex with no marriage at all, right? Just like a prostitute is able to do that. They can also have multiple sex partners with no love involved, okay, just like a prostitute does, okay? They have no or little shame about being a fornicator, women, just like prostitutes will have less shame of being like that. They get used to it. They're desensitized, if you know what I mean. Number 6, they are happy to have bastard children, just like prostitutes can sometimes have bastard children without ever getting married at all or anything. So, and of course, when we look at the statistics show that women who have had 2 or more sex partners have the highest divorce rates. It would just be like trying to get married to a prostitute. You're going to have lots of problems in the marriage, right? The sex revolution, right, that came about, like sexual freedom, sexual liberation, just play with anybody you want to play with, right? That's what the sex revolution. Well, basically, when that happened, an increase of divorces took place and a decrease in marriages took place, right? So women nowadays are not for marriage. Basically, that's what we've learned. So if someone's trying to look for a wife, they're going to be struggling. A lot of men out there are not for marriage either. So a woman trying to look for a husband is going to be struggling also, because a lot of men are too corrupt, to get married to. Otherwise, there's just going to be, they're basically, the women are basically being used by Satan as his weapon against men, against humanity, to seduce men and women into his hell, into his domain, into his underworld kingdom. Because Baal, the pagans, knew that Baal was in the underworld. Baal was associated with the underworld. This is Satan. Where Baal worship. Don't you find it interesting that the politicians and that were present at the Baal ceremony, where the Archer Baal took place? And I find it interesting that people around the world go to what you call the Feast of the Beast, which gets held into like a castle or a palace, as Fritz Springmeier puts it, by Illuminati members. Say that they come out of the Illuminati, say that there's a big palace or a castle or some kind where the leaders around the world meet there, and they meet with Satan there. Satan appears to them in the form of a shape-shifting reptile, and he gives them plans of what he wants them to do to the world. You got to remember, right, that the schools and media and these are all forms of propaganda. Mary Baxter was saying what she was saying. That's how serious this stuff is. Anyway, hopefully this has helped to educate you, and I'll leave the links down below so you can check out my facts of how the world really operates. And bye for now.